Hi, and welcome to my presentation at DevConf 2020, a survival guide for a startup CTO. I would have loved to be there in person today, but unfortunately that's not possible, and I really hope we get to meet in person soon through email or LinkedIn or any means you can find me on social media. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak here. I'm glad to be a part of the tech community in South Africa and obviously globally as well. I'm really excited about what's happening in South Africa, the innovation that's coming out and how we're responding to critical situations. It's 8 out of the top 10 universities in Africa are in South Africa. We have a lot of smart people, hardworking people, and hopefully my few notes can help you in the current job you have, the ideas you might have, or even when you will soon hopefully join a startup as a CTO. I've decided to pre-record my presentation. I am at home with 3 children and 2 Ridgebacks. A lot of barking and noises in the background, so I'll try and minimize that to get my message across as powerfully as possible. I do work for an award-winning healthcare startup. We are currently helping the government and responding to this epidemic as best and as fast as we can. My wife is an emergency medical doctor. She's had to go into self-isolation showing symptoms, and I'm hoping a speedy recovery for her as well. I've decided to do this presentation in a way that's fitting for where we are today. The WHO organization has got quite an intense handbook they prepared a few years back on how to handle international epidemics like these, how to identify them, how to respond to them, and also how to play their role within something so important and urgent. I think there are a lot of parallels we can draw with being a CTO in a startup, and I'll use that parallel throughout my presentation. So hopefully you'll enjoy what I have to share about my experience as a CTO, and hopefully also learn from how WHO handle epidemics like these. Here is an example of the epidemics that they've had to manage over a 6-year window. As you can see, epidemics is actually quite a common thing for them, maybe not at the scale of COVID-19, but they are experienced in what they do, and they have to do this at a global scale. So I think they are an organization that has learned 1 or 2 things on how to respond rapidly to changes and challenges, and to create an organization that can scale easily and be applicable and adaptable to any and every community across the world. I'm assuming most of you don't know who I am either, so I thought I'll just take a brief moment to introduce myself. I'm Ferdi Redelinghuys, born and bred in South Africa. I did my engineering degree at UCT. For a short period of time, or at least 6 to 7 years, we spent in England as a family. I had the fortune of working for Microsoft Studios and Sky while I was there. I was part of the team that shipped the Xbox One. We also, as a studio, won a BAFTA for a new interactive gaming experience. It was quite novel at the time. At Sky, I was part of the team that launched the biggest set-top box across Europe called SkyQ. And at Samsung, I launched a product specifically for low-end hotels. I have a lot of experience in launching products, finding what is valuable and what is the MVP. I also spent time at Takealot as the VP of Engineering, managing quite a big team, especially big in the context of South Africa. And there was a lot of learnings that came out of that as well. Currently, I am co-founder and CTO of Villa Mobile, and you'll hear more about that organization and how I've taken all my learnings over the years and applied it to Villa in a successful manner. I do have some education as well. I did my master's at Kingston University in London, won the prize for the best master's project. Also did executive training through Harvard in business management. I filed a patent in media streaming. I've done publications in patent recognition journals. And I really like being part of the tech space and being able to make a difference where I can. A little bit about my current company, Villa Mobile, a secure medical chat and referral system. It started off in a very humble beginning, as my business partner, Dr. William Lapham, was working as a comm service doctor in the Eastern Cape. He saw a patient with an eye condition, and he realized that this patient needed to see an eye specialist. So he wrote, as you can see on the screen, his referral, handwritten referral, saying this is urgent, it has to be addressed real soon by the specialist. The person that received the referral had never left their village before, so the concept of them traveling to a main hospital wasn't really something feasible for them. So 7 years later, when Will returned as an eye specialist with doing volunteering work, that same patient came back to him with the same note, hearing that there's an eye specialist in his community. And that's real challenges we are facing in rural South Africa, but also in developing countries across the world. And we realized there's something that had to be done about this. So this just gives an example of the type of environment specialists working today. In this picture, there's students training with the specialist at that point. The specialist is seeing a patient. There's a family with a crying baby behind him waiting to be helped. And the phone in the one corner is ringing at the same time. So what Vula has done is it created an async communication platform that works for doctors. It requires no training and just fits in really well with the protocols and systems they use today. As you can see, it's been used all across South Africa now, and we were also fortunate enough this year to win the MTN App of the Year award for the best healthcare app in South Africa. The WHO asked and answered the following question in their Managing Epidemics Handbook that I'm referring to throughout my presentation. They asked, will history repeat itself? And the answer quite clearly is yes, it will. A new HIV, a new Ebola, a new plague, a new problem with all certainty will exist again. So there's just too much happening in our world today to say that it won't. And as we know today, COVID-19 has happened, and as Bill Gates has warned us as well in a previous presentation. So the obvious follow-up question then is, so what are we doing about it? The purpose of this handbook is to provide as many answers as possible, and in doing so it examines a range of challenges and real or potential solutions, ranging from the medical and technological to the social and political. So they had to realize that epidemics happen and they will continue to happen. So what we need to do is we need to be prepared, and we need to have a structure and process in place to be able to handle it. Similarly, as a CTO and a startup, you are going to have a lot of challenges, and it's better to be prepared than to hide and ignore what could happen. The WHO handbook is quite intense and quite long and detailed. I've taken the liberty to summarize it into 3 categories. The first being be ready and able. The second is rapid response. The last is a sequence of toolboxes that they recommend you apply during an epidemic. And as I mentioned, I will use the same 3 principles when talking about how to survive as a CTO in a startup. So the first principle, be ready and able. As a starting point, I reviewed and researched how many of you would be really interested in knowing about what life is like as a CTO and how to best survive. And at the same time, offers sent out a research on the interest candidates have of becoming CTOs or starting their own companies. And quite a surprising number, 39.5%, are planning on founding their own company. And I'm thinking most likely as a technical person, you would fulfill the role as a CTO in that company. So this is actually quite a relevant topic to discuss, and I think it's something we should encourage each other to talk more about and to learn from each other. Given the effects of globalization, the intense mobility of human populations and the relentless urbanization, it is likely that the next emerging virus will also spread fast and far. It is impossible to predict the nature of this virus or its source, or it will start spreading, even though some scientific novels could predict that. But we can say with a high degree of certainty that when it comes, there will be an initial delay in recognizing it, and B, a serious impact on travel and trade, and C, a public recognition that includes anxiety or even panic and confusion. And lastly, this will be aided and encouraged by media coverage. So this relates directly back to what startup life is like as well. So you will have an initial delay in people recognizing your novel idea, or people realizing what you're doing is actually making a difference. It could have a severe or impressive impact in the communities that you're targeting. And secondly, impact on trade. Similarly, to how an epidemic can have impact on trade, so does startup life. For example, Will, my co-founder, had to sell his car at some point just to keep his head above the water. And personally, I've had to, take a serious salary cut to be able to follow what we believe. So it's not always, as rosy as it might seem on some documentaries. It is tough, and it's something to be aware of from day one. There's a lot of panic and anxiety and confusion in a startup as things constantly change, and it's important that you, as a leader in the company, can manage that for yourself, but also manage it for the rest of your team. And lastly, media coverage. In today's society, it's impossible to hide from media, so just be aware that a lot of technical people are introverted like myself, but the media is there and it's a part of your life now as well. So just embrace it and enjoy it for what it can be. Things that are important to be ready and able is to move fast, be able to plug and play. And I can just give you some examples of my personal life, right? So it's very important as a startup for you to grow and be successful and sort of beat your competition by moving faster than your competition, right? So there's the amount of learning you have to do has to be minimized, and you have to do this quickly as possible, because your learnings are time that slows you down. You need to be able to have as much experience in most of the areas you have as the same priority, and the 12th one is prioritized lower. And guess which one was being executed on? The 12th one. That's an example of doing it badly. So what you want to do is you really want to understand what are the core values, what is that North Star of your company, and align your prioritization and your product on that. You will always have a limit on resources. There's never a case of having enough. So you'll always have to prioritize, and then you get really good efficiency by executing well on those priorities. And how do you improve your product? There's the typical things that that's a lean startup approach of you listen, learn, and teach. Where teach means you actually show your product to your users. You listen to what they feel about it and how it works for them, and then you learn from it and you adapt your teaching and you change that again. For example, at Villa Mobile, as a separate topic, Villa Mobile has been used as a teaching platform for medical students, and we've been able to improve the teaching material at University of Pretoria through the listening and learning of how students approach patients and treat patients through the Villa Mobile platform. Then from a company point of view, you need to build a team, right? It's impossible to scale and grow and have immense impact on a successful idea and a product if you don't have the right people around you. So your role then becomes, like we like to refer to it in Villa, as a second boss, where you need to find people that are really good at what they do and trust them to get the job done. And your role becomes managing them and unblocking them from getting their work done. And then lastly, legacy. This is where you want to inspire and instill and create something beyond just the lifespan of the product and the company you created. So let's look at each one of those phases of a startup in more detail. So starting with an idea, I found this quote which is quite helpful in the sense of how important it is to have a North Star. So in some concepts, a North Star refers to your principles or your values that you go by as a company and a team. So this basically refers to there's supposed to be a lot of back and forth happening. There's supposed to be a lot of learning and circles happening. Like I mentioned before, you need to make those as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And the best way stay clear of losing focus on what you're trying to achieve is to have really good principles and guidelines, a North Star directing you through the seemingly chaos of understanding exactly what the customer wants. So finding your North Star, there are a lot of great companies that have shown that if you can find the right idea or the right solution and you have really good values and principles to get you there, you can make something great. For example, Amazon seeing a gap in the market in online e-commerce and taking the first approach of taking books because there was such a vast catalog of books and just doing that really well. If you look at the values on Amazon's website, it's really well defined and it speaks very closely to their founder and how he approached the company. And when you speak to people at Amazon, they all believe in those values and all believe, and that's the way things should be done. And similarly at Google, there's a culture in the organization, even though it's huge, and they believe strongly in improvement and in efficiency and doing it at scale. So that's what was their success at the start. They created a search engine that was just more efficient than the others in the market. And they did this really well, and they're still doing that, and it's very much a part of their culture. And then if you look at companies like OfferZen and now more recently Carrot as well, OfferZen has given us a great platform to do hiring on, and you really get one voice from the team that you work with there. And Carrot as well, who has replaced technical screening for you and made it a lot easier. They also have a very strong ethos on who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And for us at Villa Mobile, the idea started out with frustration of there not being enough support for healthcare workers, especially from a technology point of view. And that's our heart and soul at Villa, is to support healthcare workers. And everything we do is in line with that vision and dream. And there are many more examples I'm sure you can share as well. And what's important about this is you bring the focus during the chaos. It helps you through the difficult times. When your cash flow suddenly seems like it's going to disappear, it's very important to believe and hold on to your vision, because that's what would see you through the difficult times. It also helps to bring everyone together and help focus on that prioritization and execution of the team. Okay, next up in the phases of a startup is the product itself. A very good quote from Eric Ries from the Lean Startup, which I'm sure most of you have read or at least been exposed to, is that startups don't starve, they drown. Right? So it's never a lack of ideas that's the problem. It's typically there are too many ideas, there are too many things to do. So that's where in your product phase it's extremely important that you prioritize and focus on getting one thing done really well. So bringing that back to the WHO Managing Epidemics Handbook, they focus a lot on their improvements and behavioral change within building a strong community. So in healthcare, behavioral change is vital, and to get that done in large scale, you need commitment from and engagement from your community. And you can see that if you take it back to a startup environment, that your community can be seen as your user base or your target market. And then if you look at the important parts, the handbook highlights to build your community is you need to establish dialogue between yourself and the community. You need to build trust with a mutual understanding to find joint solutions. And then you need to empower the community, providing them with what they need most. Right? And, in building a product, as I mentioned before, there's teach, listen, and learn. So listen to your target market or community. So as you engage with them, it's very important that you listen to what they want and what they need. And then you learn from it. You learn what's important. You learn where you can make a difference, how you can align your experience and expertise into their needs. And then you teach by presenting your idea, launching a product, and then you repeat. And you repeat, and you do this multiple times, and you need to do this as quickly as possible so that your learning and your teaching can really adapt to what you're listening to. And the next phase of a startup, building your company. A very good quote, as I think most of you know from Steve Jobs, is it does not make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. So this is a very important part in building your company. You've had an idea, it's yours, you've created it into something successful. Now you need to hand that over to other people. And this is a very difficult step for a lot of founders. And this is where it's important to be humble and be able to trust other people to work with you. So in building a company, this is most likely could be your second round of investment if you had to get investment to build your product, or it could be your first round of investment. And this is where you go, I've proven my idea, proven the revenue streams or the social impact. I would like to take this further into having a bigger impact and creating more revenue across the globe. This typically needs more people, this needs more resources, and it could be a time to get investment. The important things I've learned talking to investors are people talk about the difference in knowledge and a difference in value. So a difference in knowledge base is extremely good for you as an investor. So if you look for investors, you want to get people that bring knowledge to you that you don't have. So in my case, I've got a technical background, but not really a commercial background. So investors we look for are people that are very strong commercially. Value-based differences are bad in the sense of what's important to you for your company versus what's important to the investor. And that needs to be aligned. So for a company like Vula Mobile, social impact is important to us. We want to make a difference. We want to support healthcare workers, and that's vital to us. If an investor sees that as not the real value we're adding, then that's something to avoid. So it's something to bear in mind when you get to that stage. There's actually quite a lot of investors out there, and you want to align with those that align with your values and bring you differences in knowledge that you don't have. And with product development, when you build out your company, and once you have the money to do so, you need to prioritize your hires, of course. You can't just hire everyone on the same day. And you need to define the principles and values by which your company lives, which I've referred to before, because you want to plug people into an existing system and an existing momentum. So you want them to know what that is, and you need to know who those people are that would really fit well into that environment. An important thing to do to learn what type of people you need and who would fit into your company is you need to always be interviewing. You always need to be meeting people, learning from them, understanding how they could potentially work within your company or not. And if great talent comes around, my suggestion is make a plan. You don't get great talent coming around every day. If they do, it's best they make a plan to get them into your company, because those are the real game changers. We've had a few examples of this in Buddha, where we've made things work when the right people came on the market. So continuing on, referring back to the WHO Handbook on building your company, there are different roles and responsibilities that need to be defined, processes of execution, and metrics by which to manage processes and intervention plans. So that's sort of how the third phase of the WHO Handbook works for managing an epidemic. And similarly, you can take that back to managing a startup. So when I joined Vula full-time, it was just me and one other co-founder, Dr. William Mapham. And if you're not initially part of a founding company like I wasn't, then the challenges you have as a CTO are typically very different to the challenges you would have when you started. And typically a CTO joins a startup at this stage if you're not part of the original founding team. So when they start building out the company and needing to scale the technology and the tech team, this is typically where a CTO comes on board. So things that would typically be a challenge for you as a CTO joining a startup is technical debt, the organizational structure, the data structures in terms of how tables and relationships are considered, your project delivery processes, your prioritization, how projects are being prioritized and assessed, and then how to grow the team, how to onboard people, how to interview, who to interview and who to look for, and then performance reviews as well, how to manage the team you have and also the team that you're bringing on board. So the last phase that I'm going to talk about today for a startup is legacy. This is quite an interesting one. I personally don't have any experience in this. I could only read on it, but I would like to encourage us to think beyond just the lifespan of the company and think on what is your, in a sense, exit strategy. So Bill Gates quite recently left the board at Microsoft for a very long time. And he did that because he has his legacy in place that he wants to do even more in. So it's great to think about what that legacy could be for you as well. So like I mentioned, I don't have experience in creating a legacy, but I've seen the impact of creating a legacy can have on a company. Vula Mobile initially had a grant from SAP Foundation and also the Shuttlebird Foundation, and that got the product going. That was the grant money we needed to get the product built. Without that money, Vula wouldn't exist today. We would not have been able to help more than 200,000 patients so far. Legacy is important, and it's a selfless act that's vital to stimulating the ecosystem of creating product, creating tech solutions. And I encourage all of us to think about this once we have our successful startups. Coming back to the 3 principles of the WHO Epidemic Handbook, it talks about be ready and able, have a rapid response, and have a toolbox. So I've covered be ready and able, I've covered rapid response, and now it's time for the toolbox. So in the WHO handbook, there are basically 5 tools highlighted through the toolbox, and I've related those back directly into experiences and expertise I'd like to share with you today as well. The first toolbox, understanding the role of the CTO. So in the handbook of the WHO, that refers to the role of the WHOs. So I thought, what if we just replace health with technology? Would that be quite relevant to a CTO? So if you do that, it's provide leadership in matters critical to technology and engaging in partners where joint action is needed. So you don't always want to hire teams, especially in a startup. You don't want to hire everyone to do everything. You want to find the right partners to make you move fast. And then shaping the research agenda and stimulating the generation, translation, and dissemination of valuable knowledge. That's quite valuable to a CTO as well. Setting norms and standards and promoting and monitoring these implementations. This is how do you deliver code? How do you review code? What is acceptable within your environment? How do you design your technical architecture? How do you do product development? How do you do QA? Very relevant to a CTO. Articulating ethical and evidence-based policy options. In today's world of GDPR, HIPAA compliance, and healthcare as well, this is vital, and this is a great part of a CTO today. Providing technical support, catalyzing change, and building sustainable institutional capacity. Right? Again, very relevant to a CTO. You're supporting the whole tech stack 24/7, and you need to bring about change and build this as sustainable institutional capacity. Right? You need to be able to handle the scale of the user base as it goes and the company itself. And then monitor the technology situation and assessing technology trends. Right? So it's very important to stay abreast of what's happening out there and learning from each other. I mean, none of us have all the answers, and the industry changes quite rapidly, so it's important to stay abreast of that. Something I really liked about the WHO handbook was something they referred to as the no regret policy. In their context, it means you don't spare any cost in tackling an epidemic early on. So if you need additional funding to understand what has happened, or you need additional funding to do more screening, like in South Africa we're doing more screening now, that money needs to be available. Right, so in a startup, that's not necessarily possible. Resources are very limited. But I like the concept of a no regret policy. So when you make your decisions, your critical decisions, you need to adopt, in my view, a no regret policy where you need to make those decisions really well, and you need to know that you've made the right decision. So take the time initially to make the right decision. But once you've made the decision, move on. Don't revisit it too often, right? So just something to keep in mind and think about, and no regret policy in your decision making. And then toolbox 2, owning the tech stack. So the WHO handbook, it's all about how a country can access emergency vaccine stockpiles, and what is sort of their tools in a sense from a delivery point of view. So for a CTO, for me, that refers back to your tech stack, right? So what is the tech you're using? What are the pieces to your puzzle that make the whole? Your most important role is to understand the tech stack and its detail really well. The best way to do this, I find, is to study and own the data structures and data relationships, right? So go all the way down, look at your databases, look at how those tables are set, and understand those fields, understand the relationships, because this is where you can move really fast. If you understand your tables and relationships well, you know how to bend your solution to get more done. Whereas when you build a great solution without even knowing the underlying bits of your product, you're most probably going to build things over and over again and waste a lot of time and resources in doing that. So the third toolbox is define processes and procedures. In a tech startup, this refers to quite a lot of stuff the CTO needs to do, and people really look to you as the North Star for technology and for delivering solutions. So stuff that become important here are your delivery pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline, your product definition, task tracking, testing and releases, sprint cycles, level of interaction between disciplines, roles each player in the team has, code review processes, acceptable standards of code, product roadmap and prioritization, processes for reviewing and assessing new projects, estimation costs, how to estimate costs of projects, hiring and onboarding processes, team structure, team management, one-to-ones, and performance management, approaches to technical debt, and should you work remotely or should you build the office, which I like to call the open plan fishbowl. Each one of these decisions you need to make, and ideally you make it with a no regret policy. And Vula, we got handed over same week I joined. The software vendor we used to use were no longer available, and they handed over the code to us. There were quite a lot of significant bugs, and that was released out to our users the week before I joined. And we had a lot of crashes, like 101 day, so it was quite severe. And we had as little time as possible to set up a delivery pipeline, make releases in the App Store, and obviously fix the bugs. Within the first week that I joined, we set up this pipeline. We defined it, we set it up, and we made our release to both the Android and iStore within that same week with the fixes. Right? So this is the type of rapid response a CTO will need to do in a startup. It was a lot of fun because we had no prior history in a sense, so I could pick like any technology pieces I wanted to use, which I found quite rewarding. There's something else we've done quite uniquely at Vula Mobile is the way we're doing one-to-ones. So we all follow some sort of framework in doing one-to-ones. Typically it's just a mandate from management or from the CTO that you should do one-to-ones. You spend some time drinking coffee, talk about a few things. And Villa, we've made it very structured, not to control, but to give a framework for people to work from. So in every one-to-one we talk about, give me 3 highlights since we last spoke, give me 3 lows since we last spoke, give me opportunities you see within the company and within your role, talk about threats, things that are challenging you in your role, getting stuff done. And then lastly, let's talk about objectives. What are we going to get done before we talk again? I find this a very nice conversational point and a very nice way to engage and understand what's important to the person you're talking to. Something else you need to think about is the CTO diversity within your team. This is quite a good talk on Masters of Scale, which hopefully all of you know about, where the CEO of the company said, today we're 2/3 women at the company, we're 40% people of color, our engineering team is half women. Anytime we move off of these kind of diversity levels, I say we stop hiring and then force everybody to make sure that we continue to have a very diverse team. So in today's society and today's companies, if you don't have the correct diverse numbers, it's your own fault, right? You as a CTO or a leader of a company should really be doing your part to ensure diversity is at the center of hiring. And then in terms of technical debt, don't hire a separate team to solve technical debt. You don't want your parachute team standing on their own solving technical debt. It's like making QA somebody else's responsibility. Your developers should own what they build, and they should be the ones solving the bugs they've created. Don't create big projects to solve technical debt. That's going to slow you down. You don't want to go and say, well, I'm going to spend the next 2 years to solving all my problems. What you want to do is, unless you can afford it, what you want to do is you want to bring in those technical debt solutions within each project you do. So you bring in a little bit of a tax or a VAT, in a sense, to bring in extra capacity for the existing team to solve issues that need to be solved that have been going around. Technical debt can never be avoided. It will always be there. And you need to find a rhythm that works for your team to constantly solve and improve on the code base. So just a very simple example. In Willow, the iOS app we inherited was an Objective-C, and it's quite much nicer to work in Swift, especially with how memory is being used. A lot less crashes happening in Swift. So with each feature or view that we change, we moved that over to Swift at that time, but not everything at the same time. So the next one was quite nice for me to think about when I joined Villa. Is are we going to be a completely remote team, half remote, half in office, or just completely in an office? So we took this back to the values of the company, and the values of the company are transparency, make time for your family, and be healthy. And two of those, being healthy and spending time with your family, require time at home, right? So if you commute an hour or two or more per day, that's time wasted where you could have spent with your family. Here's just a picture of my son. I'm teaching him to code, and he's enjoying it, right? This is a moment I wouldn't have had otherwise. And you could just hear the kids in the background as well. Scaling the solution. So focus your development team on building your market differentiating customer-facing software. So this is think about what's bespoke to you and your environment, and get your team to understand that really well and want to change and improve that. For the rest, if you can afford it, get stuff off the shelf, right? Don't go and host your own services. Don't try and build an amazing, impressive Kubernetes system because everyone else is talking about it. Rather go and talk to there's really good Amazon, Google, and Azure people in South Africa. You can go and talk to them, and they'll be able to help you to minimize your overhead in having to scale out your solution, and rather focus on building software that's customer facing and focused on your customer. Product design is vital to scaling feature add-ons. So a lot of times we as technical people like to think about scaling as a technical challenge. A big part of it is your product design as well. Right? If you design a product that doesn't really scale, you can have a lot of overhead later on, or pain at least later on. So for example, at Villa Mobile, we've designed the product in such a way that it's quite easy to add new specializations on our platform. Right? We started with one specialization 4 years ago. We now have over 50 specializations. Each one of those have very different needs on what they need to do referrals, but it's all quite easy to add on our platform because we thought it through quite well initially. And then identifying not only your system bottlenecks, but you also need to identify the bottlenecks for your customers. So this is important as an owner of the product and the owner of the tech stack. You need to think about, how do I unblock and scale my system, which is something people at Google are really good at doing. Also, how do I unblock my customer, right? And this goes back to the listen, learn, and teach cycle. You need to understand what's blocking your customer, and you need to understand what you can do to help them. The last toolbox talks about taking care of yourself. The seventh habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people, very, very well-known book, talks about balance and renew your resources, energy, and health to create a sustainable, long-term, effective lifestyle. It primarily emphasizes exercise for physical renewal, good prayer, meditation, yoga, whatever you're into, and good reading for mental renewal. It also mentions service to society for spiritual renewal. So some of us are lucky that we are doing the impact on society within our companies, but for some of us that's outside. And it's good to find that rewarding element or avenue where you're helping society as well. Just talking about taking care of yourself and protecting yourself. So self-protection is very important at the moment with COVID-19, especially for doctors working in emergency units. And this is a picture of my wife covering her phone. Well, everyone can guess what device she used, which is so that she doesn't take the virus home on her phone, so she can take off the covering before she comes home. So that's it. That's the 3 principles of the WHO Epidemic Management Handbook. And I think those 3 principles are extremely valuable and relevant to being a CTO of a startup, and hopefully this is a good survival guide for you. So number 1, be ready and able. Number 2, have a rapid response. And 3, have the right toolboxes in place so that you can respond well and take the company forward. Thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed doing this presentation. Hopefully there wasn't too much noise and interruption in the background. I'm going to finish off my presentation by doing a quick video. I hope you enjoy seeing the impact a South African tech startup is having within the healthcare space in South Africa.
The best way to introduce somebody to Vula is to show them actually how good it works. It's just so quick. There's no more staying on the line, holding on forever. You send the referral, you can go on with your work. The specialist on the other side can answer you as soon as he's got time, and you sort the patient out much quicker, and it just works.
It's improved the way doctors refer patients to other doctors from the outside. It's made my referral system way more convenient. It's also made it convenient on my side in the sense that my phone is not ringing every single 5 seconds.
Friends of mine work in the public sector. They use Vula all the time and they love it. So I downloaded it, and then I needed it quite soon afterwards.
For me, I think Vula has become a very essential part of the way that we do medicine in terms of the referrals and just communicating with guys. It's a lot more nimble than sitting on the phone for half an hour trying to get hold of someone. And the fact that you can share the pictures. With orthopedics, there's obviously a lot of x-rays and pictures of wounds and things that gives us a lot of information.
It's a lean system. So with lean, I mean it eliminates waste. It eliminates extra processes.
So it's definitely enabled us to run a busy service with the bare minimum, with a small department and not a lot of resource.
I think it makes a difference. Vula makes a difference with every single referral you get. But the ones where I think it's made a huge difference is especially in this community where people do not have necessarily money to afford their own transport from one hospital to another. So what Vula makes convenient for us is that certain patients who don't have to be referred to our hospital don't have to come here. They can be managed at the peripheral hospitals. You just tell the doctor on the other side what to do, what to look out for, and what to do if any problems arise.
So, for example, a patient comes in with chest pain and the junior doctor or the junior nurse is uncomfortable with the interpretation, and we can assist with that. The nice thing about Vula is that you can zoom in. It's quite high quality pictures, and we can give appropriate advice.
The future of Vula is incredible. It's pivotal in South Africa at the moment, where the link or the working between private and public is going to become much more intense, and for that reason it puts specialists in contact across both settings.
It played a role in my love for ophthalmology from the beginning. It made the learning process so much more practical.
From a personal perspective, I love using Vula. It makes my work easier. I can carry on with one patient while I'm referring another patient, and it's definitely something that I want to use even more.